Hello, everyone. Welcome to Measuring the Score podcast, the podcast where we offer our opinions on film scores and the films they're inspired by. I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Measuring the Score. I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
And this is another bonus episode. This is great. I love these.
I like the bonus episodes also.
Well, which one is better, the bonus episodes or the regular episodes?
I like them all. I don't discriminate.
Somebody's biased. So our last bonus episode, I didn't do this. I wanted to do it for this episode. We're just going to talk about it real quick because we have guests today. Leslie, what have you been listening to? Anything, any scores or anything?
No.
Not
really.
No. I recently I recently listened to the Dune score by Hans Zimmer, and as I'm talking, our guests are just making a bunch of different, so I've got to hurry up and talk about this. But yeah, I just recently listened to the Dune score, and I got to say I was very disappointed. It was not,
I'll scratch that off my list of things to listen to then.
Yeah, it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's not.
You were also speaking about the Twister score you were just listening.
Yes, I did listen to the Twister score, which will be on season 2. I'll go ahead and announce that one now. But yes, it will be on season 2, so it's going to be great. So, without further ado...
Yay!
Oh, man. I want to welcome our friends Mark and Joe from the Digital Dissection podcast. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey. Sorry, it was a tame introduction. We've been doing this whole time. You've been trying to talk and run your show.
The music just kind of burns inside of me. Okay, Chris and Leslie, you guys know that. I mean, it's hard to contain that beast. So
we all know rhythm is a dancer.
Exactly.
Mark.
A dancer is an overweight Filipino man. So.
He's not
yeah,
Elton.
Thank you.
He's not Elton John's definition of tiny dancer. Then.
No.
Unless he was being sarcastic, not sarcastic, ironic that whole time.
I'm going with ironic.
Or Joe, in the spirit of us creating words, it could be like irastic.
Yeah.
Irastic.
Full on irastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
So Mark and Joe had us on for their Firefly week, which was Mark, I believe you said it was a very stressful week for you.
Oh yeah, I think all of us on the show aged a good 10 years after that week, because it was just herding cats and then arranging content, and but it was a celebration of Firefly. We loved it, and
yeah, it was,
really
it was all
happy
Firefly, all Serenity, and afterwards lots of Serenity now.
Yeah.
It was great. We had so much fun. We wanted to invite you guys on for our episode talking about planes, trains, and automobiles, because this episode will be released during the Thanksgiving season. So why not do a Thanksgiving movie?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully none of us have to try renting a car to make this happen, because
we may not get to our destination on time.
No. So real quick,
I have
go ahead.
no cigarettes. I have no cigarettes near me because I don't want to have anything accidentally catch fire. I've been smoke-free though. Smoke-free for a long time, so we're
good.
We're not.
So has Chris.
Yeah,
Chris has been smoke-free for a long time.
Yeah, I've been smoke-free for over 10 years now.
Stay strong.
Yeah. All right, so guys, real quick, tell our listeners about your podcast and where you're available and everything else.
Yeah.
So our podcast is about all things nerdy. So basically, movies, TV, video games, other podcasts. Sometimes we'll talk them, shout them out, just like our friends here on Measuring the Score. But comic books too. So we kind of really thrive in the areas that we were growing up during, and so like 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and we just go back and talk about the stuff that we really loved, and hopefully give you some new perspective on them.
Yeah, and then during our inaugural season here, we've also kind of shifted the narrative a little bit too, to invite special guests on that have really spoken to us, and so we've had some fun rubbing elbows with folks that are part of properties that we really enjoy. So it's been a hell of a journey so far.
Yeah, you guys are killing it, man. I mean, you recently just had
Thank you.
The voice actor.
Yeah, Kyle LeBear.
Yeah, thank you.
Came on.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And then Mark, you tried to get me on for the one episode, the Walking Dead guy. The name is just completely losing me right now.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, Lou Temple. Man.
Yeah, Lou Temple. Yeah, and I really wanted to be on that episode too because I'm such a fan of his in the movie Unstoppable. Because it was every chance he got, he was slinging that dually truck around, the back end spinning everywhere, and I love that guy. But
especially good to have you that night, because that was the night the lights went out in Exonia, and our other host Chelsea may have killed an innocent man.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it was interesting. What I will say about him, because the episode will most likely be out by the time this premieres,
yes,
is that his mustache is real and it's spectacular.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Chris grew a spectacular mustache one time for Halloween because he dressed up as Mario.
Mm-hmm.
And then a day later, he shaved it off, said it was too itchy.
Oh, man. I'm talking full,
but it was wonderful. It was spectacular.
Full
mustache.
thick mustache, like Tom Selleck. I'm talking, huge. It was huge. And I was like, I cannot stand this. This has got to go away now. And then right when I shaved it, because normally I just have the goatee like I got now, and I shaved it to the mustache like Mario, I was like, oh, God, I look like my dad. I look just like my dad. And I sent a picture to my mom, and she goes, oh, no. I was like, this has got to go away quick. Yeah, this has got to go away quick. But no, right when Mark messaged me about Lou, and I was literally just left work, and I'm like, yeah, this is not happening. I'm in the car. This is not going to work. Unless we could call in or something. Like, I can't do this, man. I wanted to, though.
Yeah. If it means anything, I'm still chasing down Greg Edmondson, and if he ever responds, I'm going to give you guys a call first thing.
That would be fantastic. I would love
absolutely.
to talk with him, especially just not for Firefly, the Uncharted games as well, because those are great scores. I know we talked about it in the show, but still, yeah.
It's wonderful music.
Yeah. So you guys ready? You want to just dive into planes, trains, and automobiles?
Let's get this boarding passes punched and take our seats.
So normally on the show, we talk about the score first, and then we talk about the film. Now, with this film, it's a little bit different. There's not much score.
And the score was not released formally to the public. So
I could only find some, snippets on YouTube, and then I could find like the full soundtrack, like a playlist on YouTube, and that was it. And there's not much as far as, any trivia about the score or anything like that. But, yeah, I mean, as far as Thanksgiving films go, this is like the top one. So we had to cover it.
So Ira Newborn was the composer for this. And Ira Newborn has worked on several of John Hughes films before this one and after this one. So they worked together before. And really, scores have just escaped me of what he's done.
Ferris Bueller's Days Off.
That's right, Ferris Bueller. But
also the Blues Brothers.
That wasn't John Williams. I mean,
that was John Hughes.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's notable, and he's worked with them prior and afterwards. So you would think that there'd be a lot of music to listen to, and it would be great because it's a John Hughes. No.
Also,
it's
just found out he did the Naked Gun.
Yes, he's known for the Naked Gun.
Yeah.
Which also, like, the Naked Gun movies have like a pretty like prominent theme and score throughout. So I remember like when you pitched this to us, like the idea of coming on, and I rewatched the movie again, or even like before you watch it, I'm like, I don't remember there being a lot of music in this movie.
No.
Like I remember being like still a lot of like you sitting with the uncomfortable and awkwardness that Steve Martin is sitting through most of this movie. And I felt like, I don't know if that was intentional, but it's like, yeah, there's plenty of times like he's sitting here, he's uncomfortable, he's mad, and you're stewing with him.
Yeah. The thing that I think really kind of stuck out to me on this was that when you look at a lot of popular films that either just like around the holidays or they're just iconic from this era, they do tend to have, you know, some kind of music that's like instantly recognizable for that movie, right? And whether it's an original song or whether it's just there's something that is that moving and that, I don't know, like that easy to consume. I mean, I can just think of like Beverly Hills Cop, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future. I mean, every one of those has something where that happens to you. And so with this movie, that never really happened at any point. There's not music where I go, oh yeah, it's playing Trains and Automobiles, you know. And I don't know.
There's like
Correct
this.
Me if I'm wrong.
Well, there's like this running motif
really
with the score.
bluesy,
It's like a blues, almost, you know, guitar, old country sounding. It kind of makes me think of the movie Tremors every time I hear it. Same with Leslie.
Kevin Bacon is in it too.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. So maybe, this is before Tremors. This is when Val was in the city and everything before he moved to perfection. That's what happened. It's before the worms. He met with Steve Martin and Neil Page.
Yes.
And then he thought, you know what's better than the city and the city life? Ranch and ostriches. That's what I'm going to go and do.
And emus.
And emus.
And emus.
Don't forget about the mystic emu.
And then he's chasing after...
The Australians will never forget.
I'm going to say for retirement plans, the only thing I could think of is move out into the country and eat me a lot of peaches or ostrich farm. Yeah, those are the two things you do.
Yeah.
But, you know,
sorry,
there is a running thing here between Kevin Bacon and Steve Martin. So, you know, at the beginning of the movie, you see them. But this was filmed right after she's having a baby. And so, you know, Kevin Bacon was in She's Having a Baby. John Candy had a cameo in She's Having a Baby. And, you know, it was flipped. So it throughout the movie, you'll see references, just indirect references to She's Having a Baby. It's amazing. It's almost like it's in the same universe. And he's kind of dressed at the very beginning the same way as he was dressed in She's Having a Baby.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's in the John Hughes-verse.
Yeah,
that's what we were talking
universe.
about. The multiverse of John Hughes.
The multiverse of John Hughes.
Yes.
She's Having a Baby and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles are connected.
Oh, you know, like the house kind of looks very similar to the Home Alone house, you know?
Yeah.
I got that same vibe, Mike. Is this a McAllister home?
And the old man that sits next to him on the plane and coach also appears in Home Alone as the guy that they barter with to get on the plane to go back home.
So it's a John
That's
Hughes
right.
multiverse.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
and also, all right, so it was Home Alone 2. It was the old man Duncan's toy chest also appears in that movie Baby's Day Out, which is also a John Hughes movie.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So
it's all connected. Yep, the whole
it's all
thing.
connected.
It's all connected.
You know, it's just like
Yeah,
this-
but we
Killing it.
thought Marvel was ambitious.
Exactly.
With their crossovers.
they got nothing
No.
with John Hughes, buddy.
Kevin
Indirect.
Feige, you were just Bush League, man. You're Bush League compared to John Hughes.
He's
Your
years
billions of
ahead of
dollars.
time.
So, right off the bat, I mean, it has. I've watched this movie. God, I really don't know how many times, and every time I watch it, it's one of those movies. Is every time you watch it, you always find something new. Every time, and like, all right, the scene where John Candy and Steve Martin, John Candy's holding him and they're sleeping. They're sleeping in the same bed. John Candy is like kissing his ear.
Yeah, he's
And just
nibbling.
slowly kissing on his ear, and he's hugging him.
Affectionately.
He's like, Dell, why are you kissing my ear? Why are you holding my hand? I never paid attention that he was kissing his ear. When I saw it, I busted out laughing. I'm like, did he just kiss his ear? And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, you don't need a blanket in that bed, that's for sure. Yeah, I agree with you completely, because what I found myself doing was watching John Candy's hands the entire time throughout this movie, because seriously, like, he plays the role of someone who, you know, maybe hiding a secret, or maybe he's uneasy, and so if you watch his hands, it's definitely there. Like, he's not just a comedian in a comedy, you know, he's actually playing with some layers here.
Yeah, you know, the
very fun
first
to watch.
time you watch that movie, you see that, especially when it came out, we were kids. So it was you could see the comedy immediately. But when you're an adult and you go back and you watch that movie and you can see the layers, you've got this one pretentious man that is played by Steve Martin's character that obviously doesn't stay at home all the time. You know, he's work consumed. He's a grumpy man. He's pretentious. You know, he's uptight. And then you've got this other fellow, you know, that hadn't been home. The death of his wife apparently was so traumatizing to him that he really, after all these years, spoilers, okay. But the death of his wife was so traumatizing to him that, you know, he's just been in limbo for 8 years. And you start seeing these layers behind, which John Hughes is a master of that if you watch any of his films. But you don't pick that up right away until you start watching the movie and get past the comedy. Because, you know, the comedy is like, as my teacher in English used to say, peeling the onion. You start peeling the onion layers back. Yeah, to get to the core issue.
Like an ogre.
You know, it does kind of feel like an underhanded Kaiser Soze moment when he puts it together that, like, yeah, he said some things to me that nobody probably picked up on that indicates that he's got nowhere to go for Thanksgiving, you know?
Right.
So I thought that was funny. But before we get too far away from it, speaking of John Hughes being ahead of his time, ahead of the MCU, you know this movie has an end credit scene, right?
Yes.
I still, like, one day we were watching this during the holidays and we're like all talking and drinking and eating and having fun, and we just let the credits roll. And then we got to the end and I'm like, this movie has an end credit scene.
Ferris Bueller is the same way. If you watch Ferris Bueller, you know, the very end, there's an end scene with him in the shower. And you're like,
yeah,
wow, you know, after seeing credit. Nowadays, you know, you stay purposely to see if there's, you know, a scene after the end of the credits. But it goes back to John Hughes being ahead of his time.
Yeah. I loved it too, because it totally plays off of what happens early in the movie. I don't want to ruin it because I want people to actually go and look at this.
Yeah, that is one thing we're not going to spoil. So everybody, if you're curious about this, stop the podcast, go watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, let the credits roll, and then come back and finish this.
Yep. And before we get too far away, I have a question that needs to be answered right away, and that is, how many Shrek references do two podcasts have to make before one of them finally covers Shrek? Because we have also done the ogre and onion layer thing several times, and neither of these podcasts, to my knowledge, have actually had the cojones to cover a Shrek movie.
Well, I guess the ball's in your court, guys.
And we'll
have you back season 2. You just wait.
Exactly. We'll be on for Shrek, so that's fine.
We guess.
Yes.
We both verbally and non-verbally quote "better out than in" all the time. So you can't see it. It's a podcast, but trust me, it's there.
It's there.
It's there.
Undercurrents.
Actually, I think every podcast does that.
Sorry, guys. The toilet humor can't escape me. It's just
it's fine.
It's my cologne. It's my
It's
cologne.
funny.
I'm emanating it.
See, this is why this is a bonus episode.
People might not wanna hear.
Yeah. You should do measuring the score after dark.
Measuring the score unhinged.
Unhinged.
Yeah.
Or at the very
All
least,
crazy.
we have an end credit scene after the podcast is over.
So let's go to the very beginning of the film. And there is a score piece called Rush Hour. So, you know, as we mentioned, the score begins. I'm sorry, Chris. I know I keep drifting away
She
from
has
the
this
microphone.
thing where it's like, and I'm going to talk. And oh, I'm sorry. I'm back.
And I know I'm doing it. But anyway.
It's like a typewriter. You just have to push her back.
That's
It's
right.
like Dr.
No, I
It's
just
like
have to
Dr.
keep,
Evil,
you know,
though. Like
it-
when Dr.
guide
Evil
me.
keeps swiveling away in the chair, and you're like,
it's exactly what's going on. I'm steadily moving.
Yeah,
the mic
you
over
see
there.
Chris's hand. He's like, come on, wife. Come back closer. So anyway, we've got this piece called Rush Hour. And I did listen to this piece. I was able to find it before I watched the movie. And just listening to it, you could tell that you have a city setting. He had some ambient music in the background that was pretty cool. That, you know, you could hear the cars and the horns and stuff like that. And it was a quick beat, so the speed of it was really reminiscent of him kind of rushing around. And you can easily visualize it. And let's see here.
That's some up-tempo synth is what you got
That's
going
right,
on.
synth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the synth for that. It was great.
And it was
because
very era specific. You know?
Yeah.
yes, I was gonna mention that. Absolutely.
You definitely know you're in New York in the 80s when that
Yeah.
song comes on.
Well, but then they supplement too at times with like some light cymbal action.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you almost get that, like you mentioned, with the city.
Yeah.
With
Um,
the city.
the hustle and bustle. I feel like the
I don't know if you're
symbol
going
does-
for like smooth jazz or Batman. when
Yeah.
you're doing that.
yeah.
That was so
Welcome
funny.
to 94.1 Gotham. We're going to be listing some symbols tonight.
Bruce Wayne is attending a party tonight.
Yeah.
But what
Or
I found
is he?
fascinating is that when you watch the score piece against the film, and you've got Steve Martin's character trying to get a cab, and he locks eyes with Kevin Bacon's character, who's also trying to get the cab, and then the music starts up. It fits perfect. I think that
Yeah.
it was well done. They
Yeah.
start rushing around. You start seeing the cars, and you're like, okay, he did a really good job, kind of emoting that I am in a rush. This is rush hour. I got a place I got to go. I really liked it, and I liked how they placed it there at the very beginning. And then, of course, you see what happens to Steve Martin. He first
Mhm.
meets Dell. He falls over in the street, over Dell's crap.
Well,
at
now,
the
all right.
street.
So this was interesting. Now, Dale's initials is Dale O. Griffith, dog, DOG. I did not even put two and two together until she's looking up trivia. I'm like, oh. And then John Candy played
Barf.
Barf in Spaceballs,
Yeah.
half man,
Yeah.
half Mog.
It was a dog.
Yeah, it was a dog.
Yep.
I was like,
You know-
that's funny.
See, and that's something I thought about as a kid was that, when you see how it says dog, his character does feel like an untrained, lab
He does.
that just will not get out of your lap,
Mhm.
constantly licking you.
Stubborn.
And so, yeah, it's just a really fun play on that.
Yeah.
I thought it was really good.
And I'm trying to remember, like, did that happen before? That happens before the whole, like, he sees the other cab and starts
Yeah.
offering to pay the other guy,
Right. Yeah.
'Cause
This
then
is.
he recognizes the trunk in the back of the cab as he speeds off. But
Yeah,
what I
that's
find
what it is, yep.
fascinating is that as he speeds off, it shows the mud puddle. And I saw something in the mud puddle, and I'm like, what is that in the mud puddle? And then when I was looking at trivia, they said if you look closely, the shower curtain rings are left in the mud puddle, and the cab speeds
Oh.
off. And I'm like, okay.
Oh man, I love
Nice
this movie.
little, nice little
And then
additions
you
there.
get to the point where Steve Martin finally gets the cab and he gets to the airport, and that's when he's trying to look at something, and he's looking at over John Candy's character, and John Candy's reading a book that says The Canadian Mounted.
Yes.
That is not appropriate, reading material in an airport.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like that YouTube video of the guy who like prints fake dust covers for his books that are very,
Yes.
very explicit,
yes.
and that he just sits and sees like how people react to it. Like John Candy's been doing that since the 80s.
I think they were making fun of him too because he's Canadian. So he's sitting there in America
Yeah.
reading a book.
And then you get one of the most hilarious scenes, and to me in the movie is when he's Steve Martin's trying to picture him. He's trying to figure out where do I know this guy from. All of a sudden you get the cab door sitting in the airport, and John Candy's character turns and looks all surprised, like he's like, oh, that's where I know him from. He's
Flashback,
the
yeah.
guy who. It's like that was actually very genius that John Hughes did, but it's also hilarious because you just got this cab door just up here out of nowhere, and he's like,
Yeah. Yeah. It totally looks like someone who just had a bathroom door opened on him, like it was, I mean, I can't say this enough about John Candy, not just here, but in other movies. I mean, it's Joe and I have talked about this with Ghostbusters many times, how people just go, yeah, that's a comedy, and you kind of write it off. With John Candy, it's like, yeah, he's a comedic actor, but man, he's not just funny. I just appreciate him for his nuance and for being able to do stuff like that. I mean, he turns it on and off throughout this film, and it's honestly a treat just to watch that.
They said Steve Martin was convinced to do this film for two reasons. And one of the reasons was the scene where he goes to the car lot and, he starts dropping the F-bomb all over the place.
Oh my god.
That
yes.
convinced him to be in the movie. And he really liked that scene. And then the second scene was when they're in the car and the automatic seat is, I'm sorry, Chris, the automatic seat. The seat is going back and forth. So they said that those two scenes, Steve Martin's like, yep, I'm going to be in the film. And oddly enough, this is his favorite film of all time that he's done, and it was John Candy's favorite that he did.
I'm sorry,
before he
I'm
passed
still
away.
laughing at the seat because everybody's been there, especially in the 80s. You had those electric seats,
And they were cushy too.
They were cushy,
plush velvet,
but yet they never
comfortable.
would sit down right.
Wouldn't work right, no.
No, they never would work right. And then if you hit the button just wrong, you mess the whole thing up, and you're sitting there, you're steadily playing with it. And it was true back in the 80s. If you kept playing with it that much, you would break that seat. Nowadays, it's like near impossible. And then then the seat goes keeps going back, and then it'll go up, and it'll go back, and then like fall backwards on John Candy, and then the whole seat just goes sideways. It's like, they don't do that. But yeah, it's like that, but you're still laughing the entire time this is happening because you just see Steve Martin so frustrated, and you feel for the guy, but at the same time, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah. Oh well, I felt for him when John Candy's taking his shoe off in the coach, and you're like, but wait, there's more. And then he starts taking his sock off, and I'm like, man.
He's wafting it. He's shaking it out in front of his face.
That was another one of those moments I never paid attention to. He's like waving around in his face. Oh my God.
What about when he was clearing his sinuses, trying to go to bed? If I
No.
don't do it, I'll choke in my sleep. Do you want me to do that? And he's like, obviously no, but at the same time, you couldn't think of a better way to do this.
See, if I was in this situation, I would get mad, but I would not go to the extent like what Steve Martin did, where he just starts calling him a Chatty Cathy doll, and he's like steadily pulling on the string. I was like, oh, dude, you just went way too far there.
Way
buddy.
too far. No, I think what you do there is you go and you sleep in the bathtub, and then get some red dots over your back and claim that the hotel had bed bugs.
Yeah.
This is a true story, by the way. Friend of ours. So I was a heftier man back then, and I was apparently sleeping on the floor like a wild beast.
I don't know why you offered to sleep on the floor. There's plenty of bed space.
I was being a gentleman. Anyway, he gets up in the middle of the night and goes and sleeps in the bathtub because I'm being too loud. And then he wakes up with red spots all over his back and says, "Man, they had bed bugs in this place." And like, we're both going, "Okay, I slept on the floor.
I slept in the other bed.
Joe slept in the other bed, and nobody else has bumps, But sorry, tangent. But hey, speaking of nightmare fuel from a hotel, the bathroom scene is one of those sequences where we talk about the score and how there's not a whole lot of music.
And it's like
this is where it's
interjected.
like silence is used to like full effect when you see these like wet bunched up towels, and I immediately, every time I see that, I go from enjoying the film to I have anxiety right now.
Yes, because there's water on the floor,
or like when he's washing
his all over.
Like when he's washing his face, and then he looks down. He's like, "What is that smell?" And he looks down and sees the socks in the toilet in the sink. And I'm like, "Oh,
yeah." Chris is like, "Oh, that's nasty."
All right, so the subtlety of the score. All right, this is in the same scene, but it's at the very beginning when they first walk in and they're looking around the room and the camera's zooming around. All of a sudden, it goes to the bed. There's no score, but then you get this very subtle 80s synthesized, percussion moment to just to signify.
Just a second.
Oh, it's only one bed. And then they kind of look at each other. All of a sudden, you get that little percussion hit just again. It's like, and I was like, that's very subtle, but at the same time, it works. It works well for the scene. It plays on the comedy. And I was like, that's pretty genius.
Yeah, you'd think that you would have this full orchestration or something come in, and you're right, Mark. They used that silence to play upon the anxiety and the comedic element because the character's uptight, so he sees this mess. He's a very clean guy, and he's got water on the floor, dirty towels already, and it took him 2 seconds. I mean, he wasn't in the shower that long for him to come in there. And then he walks in the room and he's got crap on the bed, on the bed stand. He spilled beer in the bed.
Yeah, he tells the story of spilling the beer and Steve Martin's having to lay in it. I'm like, oh, that's bad.
So they kind of
but I mean, he was nice enough to let Steve Martin's character pay for the room.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
nice.
Yeah.
Don't want to feel like he was imposing by that.
I don't want to feel like I'm a freeloader or anything.
But then they had this riff that would play. I would call it a motif for this movie. This is this bluesy riff. Wasn't that long. You didn't see it in many of the scenes, but when you did see it, it was the same blues riff that they played, and it was really bizarre because it was a mixture between blues and it felt like it had kind of like a a rock element.
It had
to
almost
it.
a sad
Yeah.
tone to it. It's just like it's just like everything's just beaten down. I want to call that's the theme for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
It more
because
likely is.
it's the one score piece that shows up the most throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
And whenever it plays, you just like, oh no, what happened now? You know,
Because didn't it show up when the train broke down?
Yeah.
Yep.
That bluesy, that motif right there.
And then it showed up again when the car was after the car was set on fire. and you see it dragging through the town with the tow truck, and it plays again. Now, you know, going back to the beginning, how the film opened up with that, you know, synthesized Rush Hour piece. I thought for the longest time that there was a lot of score pieces in there that Ira Newborn did that was synthesized. Come to find out, it was not. It was soundtrack.
Yeah, it was confusing.
One of them was the Red River Rock song.
Yeah, it's Red River Valley.
I thought,
yeah.
Well, it's Red River Valley, but the song is called Red River Rock. I thought it was the score. And then it was like when I was trying to do research for this episode, I found out that no, that was not the case. It was part of the soundtrack. And that's when I was like, this is going to be interesting because there's a lot of pieces in this film that I thought for years were score. Come to find out, it's soundtrack. One of them being the sad moment when, like when the whole part with the bedroom scene where John Candy's, you know, talking about Steve Martin just blows up on him, and then John Candy's talking about, you know, my wife likes me, you know, I like me, my customers like me, and you get this synthesized, you know, song playing, and you thought for the longest time it was score, but come to find out it was soundtrack, and you found out some trivia about this, right?
About what?
About this song. It was supposed to be Elton John, right?
Oh. Yeah, so sorry.
Completely spaced on that one. She's just like, about what?
Well, what? I read so much, guys. I'm so sorry. Elton John was originally supposed to write the music for, or the theme song for the movie, and Paramount Pictures came back and said, you know, he was getting ready to perform it to send over to them, and Paramount Pictures said, well, we will gain full rights of the song. You've got to sign this waiver. And Elton John's record company was like, no, we can't do that. So it never happened, and it was never recorded. But yeah, he was slotted to write the theme song for the soundtrack for this movie.
I'm kind of curious if that would have helped or hurt the film. I mean, because
Elton John's a good writer, though. You know, it may would have fit in, and it may be a little bit more sad. It might would have more tear-jerky, you know, effect.
Yeah, maybe.
You never know.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another one. It's right before Steve Martin's tirade when he goes off and starts saying the F word to Debbie McClure.
That was ad-libbed, by the way. She ad-libbed her part.
Yeah, completely. Her entire thing was ad-libbed, where she's like talking on the phone and everything else. And you hear Steve Martin when it's like right when Steve Martin just throws everything down. He's so frustrated. He's like, "I'm done," and you hear a snippet of him saying, "You messed with the wrong guy," in this like synthesized song. I thought that was score. I thought it was like, okay, Ira Newborn is just having fun with it. No, that's soundtrack as well.
Soundtrack.
Okay,
it's a song, and it's like it says "Planes, Trains, and Automobiles" remix. I was like, wait, what? And if you play the song, it has little snippets, clear, straight up 80s fashion, little sound bites from the film playing in there, and it's playing in almost like somebody messing with a record, with a turntable, scratching it back and forth.
Yeah.
But it was a fun song. But I thought it was score for the longest time.
Yeah, it's really tricky because you start listening and you're like, that's not score. You thought the score was coming in, and you start listening, you're like, no, that's not score.
It's not score, and it actually it's almost disruptive to me, because I felt like that was something that really got popular, maybe about 5 years after this film came out. Like you saw a lot of early 90s movies that did this, and or at least you could hear shoehorned in dialogue into music like that. And I don't know, it like you guys just mentioned, you hear it and you're like, what is that? And I went back and rewatched it a couple times when I was younger because of that, going, what am I listening to right now? And I don't know, maybe it's because I try to follow along with the rest of the music as a book, like it's telling a story, where really it's I don't know, it really is kind of all over the place.
And even like the whole, like the addition of Steve Martin saying like, you've messed with the wrong guy. When you have that with this character. I mean, when you have the whole like you've messed with the wrong guy comment, you think that there maybe is going to be something that backs that up
Right.
after saying it, but he kind of just continues to get stomped on after that.
Yeah.
And it's
Because
almost,
you have, oh no, go for it.
I was going to say, it's almost like the old way, because in the old movies, you had a lot of dialogue and there was hardly any music. You would have some musical pieces in there, especially if you had the long movies like Gone with the Wind, for example, and they had like an interlude, because that movie was like 4 hours long, and
Roughly
so
2 days.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there was like an interlude piece, and then you'd hear it like sporadic, but there's a lot of verbal call and answer, so to speak, throughout the movie. And this was very similar to that. It kind of reminded me of the old way. And then you had some of this new synths kind of interwoven in there, and the soundtrack interwoven in there. But it was mostly dialogue. You didn't hear any of that to accentuate the scene. It's like he let the characters do what the characters were meant to do, be comedians.
I think there's only like one scene in particular that comes to my head when, as far as where the score is very predominant. And that's the whole sequence where John Candy gets his jacket stuck on the car seat.
Oh, yes.
And that
Now-
was a score piece.
Yeah, that was all score piece. And then this car spins around. Now, first off, who here has actually gotten their jacket stuck while driving, trying to get it off?
I have before.
Not my jacket, but my pants.
Yeah,
Wait, what?
So in a braver time of my life when
Uh-oh.
I used to like bartend and then still try and have a social life,
Yeah.
and I left the bar wearing, okay, so I used to work also at like a family restaurant / nightclub in a tourist trap of a town here in Wisconsin. And so I had like black pants and like a Hawaiian shirt, and that's what I had to wear to work. So I was changing out of that as I was driving to where I was going to like have a party with my friends, and my pants definitely got stuck in transition from my black work pants to my denim that was trying to get on. I did not get in any accident. I think I gave up and just ended up parking somewhere and taking my pants off
good.
and putting new pants on. I didn't just go pantsless and give up
See,
that much.
I had my hair stuck in the door one time. My hair was longer than this. And I go and I close the door, and my hair got stuck in the door, and I'm like, I can't move my hair. And I couldn't look, like left to right, because it was like really stuck. And I had to find a place to stop so I could open the door real quick, and take my hair out. So I have been stuck in the car also.
I've gotten my jacket stuck one time, and,
Yeah.
and when it got, I was doing the same thing John Candy was doing, and right when it happened, it was only one arm, thankfully, so I still had my other arm in the steering wheel. But the first thing that popped in my head was that scene there where he got stuck, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm going to spin out, and then I'm going to catch the car on fire, and everything's going to blow up, and it's going to be my fault because I wanted to take my jacket off." So finally, I got my arm back, and I'm like, "I'm leaving the jacket on,"
Yeah, he's like,
all because of John Candy.
Yeah.
So the whole sequence, he's stuck and he's trying to drive the car with his legs at one point because both of his arms get stuck, and then the car spins out, and they end up going the wrong way. So you got this transition where this like, I don't want to say it's the typical comedy moment where you got the low bass, horns coming in,
Yeah, it was a tuba. It sounded like a tuba.
trombone, just to play on the comedy. And then the whole sequence where they're going the wrong way and they're realizing they're going the wrong way shifts from that tuba comedic moment to this very almost serious sounding moment when you see the two 18-wheelers coming at them.
Yeah.
And the music swells into this big, and that was, like I said, that was the only real moment that I could think of aside from the blues riff where there was a lot of score in here.
And what I think fascinating about that piece is that you hear the tubas. Typically you think of the lower instruments when they do comedy because for some reason they're supposed to be funny. But then I don't know why.
It's an awkward instrument. It's really big. It makes a deep sound. You can't laugh
It's
at
funny.
it. I don't know.
But he not only that, he took I could have swore I heard a bari sax in there, and I heard some clarinets. I'm like, well, this is very intriguing because he's got these low, brass, and then you've got this bari sax, which is woodwind, but it's low also, and then these clarinets come in,
and then you get the full orchestra when the 18-wheelers show up, and it sounds like something from the classic 80s horror film, and you're going,
Yeah.
And he looks over and he sees the devil.
And then both of them turn into skeletons at one point.
Yep.
Great.
Oh
Great.
man, that was this whole movie. I swear, there's like so many moments in there. It was just it's so ridiculous, but at the same time, it's truly hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And the original plan for this episode, listeners, was we were going to talk about planes, trains, and automobiles, and they were also going to cover Dutch. Unfortunately, Dutch, in which I cannot figure out a reason why, is not available anywhere streaming. Anywhere. You can't even buy the DVD anymore. And Mark, I believe you said your answer was legally we can't find it.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want to do that for this podcast.
It's like locked in the Smithsonian. Like we'd have to go in there, National Treasure style.
Yep.
Yeah. Like Joe comes up, he's like, "Hey, what are we doing tonight?" And we're like,
"We're gonna steal Dutch."
I think we're gonna steal Dutch. That's what we're doing, man. We're gonna get in a van. We're gonna go on down to the Smithsonian. We're gonna steal Dutch.
Van. That's funny.
Very, very good Nicolas Cage impression, by the way, because we couldn't afford him. So, thank you.
But hey, to your guys' point about this, though, I haven't really watched this movie and just listened to the music. When you guys came on and we did the Firefly stuff, like I have sat and appreciated where a score and where music played a part in guiding you throughout that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back and watched this for this purpose, I mean, it did kind of change the way I appreciated this movie in both the comedic sense and what the music was trying to do, or the score was trying to do. And it did seem like, the focus was, if you were John Hughes, you're like, you know what? Let the comedy do what the comedy's going to do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't need to worry about guiding people to this. They're going to find it on their own. And so, like the music accents some of the bridge
more
areas
intense
of the movie.
scenes, or bridges and intense scenes,
Yeah.
All right. So normally on this podcast, what we do, we break it down to 3 criteria. Does the score work for the film? Well, since the film is mainly soundtrack, I'm going to change it up a little bit. Since this is a bonus episode, we can do something a little bit different. Now, does the score and does the soundtrack work for the film? Let's what little bit of score there is, does in your guys' opinion, does it work for the film?
Joe,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I do. I mean, I think we talk about like that early part in the city where we've got rush hour traffic. He's trying to make his cab. You've got this really, really upbeat, intense synth, not Sith. Synth.
Evil music.
Wrong podcast.
And then whenever something bad happens, you get this this slower, lower with score of the banjo coming in. I think the music works really well as an accent piece to this movie, where it really, I don't want to say drives it home, but like if you need just that little extra, the music does it.
Mark?
Yeah, I really do think that the music is not really the focus here. The score isn't really something that you're gonna basically want to rip and then listen to privately and enjoy it later on. It just, I think in one of your other episodes you've mentioned listening to the score of a film with the movie and then listening to it on its own, and then sometimes not even really recognizing that this is the same movie,
right.
And I think that happens here, where if you're listening to the score and even the soundtrack to an extent, the soundtrack of this movie really fixes the position of this film in like hardcore 80s.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's where it gets lost a little bit in that, in the iconography of the time. I mean, there's so many films with recognizable themes, like I mentioned earlier on, that I think the music really isn't the focus of the film, like I said before. And I think it does work where it's used, but there's so much empty space in this film. I think it could be just as successful without it. So for me, I'm going to go the other way and say, I think it doesn't work for the film because it doesn't need to. There's so much else going on. So sorry, Joe.
Hey,
we're fighting on this one.
We're fighting on it. That's why we have, more than just us. And by that's why the show has its regular hosts.
Okay, Leslie.
Yes.
So, I have said several times before that a good score can either make or break a film. And a score's purpose is to uplift the film. You could have a bad movie, and if you had a good solid score, then it could make the movie tolerable and feel better. Likewise, if you had a solid movie and you had a horrible score, the movie, in my opinion, it's not worth watching. In this instance, I think that the use of the soundtrack in the score and how some of the soundtrack pieces are really kind of disguised as kind of score pieces, because to me they sound almost the same in instances, has helped the movie out. You've got this dialogue and it's really subtle when it comes in. So it hadn't hurt the movie, and they allowed the characters to do what they were hired to do, or, Steve Martin and John Candy, what they were hired to do. So I think that in that sense, it does work for the movie because it doesn't take away anything from the movie. I think that it, adds to the movie in the part, like at the beginning, the rush hour scene. You heard the hustle and the bustle of the big city. If you rewatch the movie and try to picture that scene without the score, then you would it would feel empty. So I think it added layers there by adding that score piece there to the beginning. And of course it added layers to that comedic part where the car catches on fire. You had that whole, that whole, accident scene. It added to that. So in that respect, I feel like it did do its job, and it was solid in that instance. Do I think it was peculiar with some of his choices? Yes, I do. Especially when you had that same motif that was like 2 seconds. It made you want to hear a little bit more, but it wasn't there. That to me was bizarre. But besides that, I think the score did do its job and did work for the film.
Yeah, 2-1.
All right, so sorry, Mark.
Uh-oh.
I gotta agree with Leslie on this, because even though the score was so sparse and the soundtrack was more notable than the score was, I don't think you could have completely taken the score out, because, for instance, like the whole sequence with the cigarette going into the back of the seat, and the whole truck sequence, and even though the little blues motif or harmonica, tremors piece, however you want to say it, keeps coming in every so often, pretty much the theme of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, even though it's not very long, just for those brief moments, it works. It kind of gives you like a little bit of a relief, but also kind of telling you, hey, something else bad's fixing to happen again. More crap's going to happen to these two guys. And for those couple of moments where there were score, it works. So yeah, I'm going to say the score definitely does work for the film, in my opinion. So sorry, Mark, you've been voted out.
Hey, it's okay. The way I see it is, it's kind of like a pair of socks with a hole in the bottom. I mean, yes, technically it functions as a sock, but the second you step on like a puddle or a rock or something, it's there. It's not going away. And so that's kind of where I was with this. Mm-hmm. Like it's, like in a movie like Star Wars, for example, they do those motif moments that basically take over a full production score, and it's so much better accented because of the fact you've got these crazy big pieces for other areas of the film, right? And when they do it here, I agree, those little motifs do have more effect, I think, than some of the bigger pieces of score or soundtrack that appear. But yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, watching the film with this lens, I just went, yeah, I could watch this movie without it and be just as happy. So
and I think
that's fine
that, yeah. Maybe the movie did have more score pieces because the original movie was 3 hours long.
Yep.
And they felt like it was too long, and they cut it down, and they cut it down again. So there might have been more score pieces throughout the movie that they didn't utilize because of the length of the film when they started doing their screening. So, maybe we just got a glimpse of, what was left after they cut it down, because, at the very end, you'll see John Candy and he looks like he's got a bruise on his face and he's got a bruise on his eye, and you're like, well, I know that must have been a cut scene because we didn't see anywhere where he fell on his face or got hit. And when I was looking at trivia, as a matter of fact, he got punched in the face because he told Steve Martin's character that he didn't have any rental insurance on the car that he rented, under Steve Martin's name after it burned up. Yep. So Steve Martin punched him in the face. Well, we didn't see that. We just saw the scene with him that had a bruise, on his face. So, maybe the movie had more score in it than what we heard.
All right. So, with that being said, sorry, Mark, 3-1.
Oh, you're gonna rub that in? No, that's not.
So,
nice.
all right. So, basically, what we're saying is, some of us agree that the score could have not been there. Some of us agree that the score worked just fine. Now, what about the soundtrack? Now, because there was more soundtrack than there was score. In my opinion, I think what soundtrack was placed in there, I think it was placed in there perfectly. I really don't think there was a moment in there where I'm like, oh man, why'd they pick that song? I mean, like when you get the Ray Charles song in there when John Candy's playing it on the dash and he's smoking the cigarette and everything else. And then you get the, like I mentioned earlier, the Red River Rock song, and it's it's basically a Planes, Trains, and Automobiles version of the song, and that will work. So they bring that in there a couple of times in the film, and it works every time. There's a placement of soundtrack in there. It works, in my opinion. Now, Leslie.
Well, I just mentioned it with when I was talking about whether the score worked. It was kind of intermingled with the score, so. There were pieces that sounded, very score-like, and I think in that element, because they've blended the two so well, that it worked fine. Because I had to sit there and think about it as I was watching the movie. Is this a score piece or is this the soundtrack? And then the more it played, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's the soundtrack. So, I mean, I think that it worked fine. And John Hughes is a master of trying to invoke emotion through soundtracks. So. John Hughes was good at it anyway.
Yeah, because look at the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Mark?
Yeah, and I was going to say that the soundtrack to me, while I didn't have any issue with it, it did feel like a couple that shares a Facebook account. Like I thought the soundtrack had just been called like Steve Rebecca Smith because it did feel like a score at certain points. And when it didn't, it encapsulated, like I mentioned before, that mid to late 80s feel. But like you mentioned, the blues songs that kind of show up in there, I just have to wonder who made that call. It's not like it was bad. I think the blues songs that show up in some of these shorter pieces that go with it, I think they do work. So for me, I when I was coming into this, I was thinking, yeah, the score I didn't really feel attached to, but the soundtrack I thought was enough of what we needed. And so, yeah, that's why it's like, yeah, I'm going to be the confusing one tonight, everybody. I apologize. But yeah, I thought the soundtrack was there. The score probably, didn't need to be just because of that balance. So yeah, that's where I was at with it.
And like with the Ray Charles song "Mess Around," I mean that had to be a very conscious decision from very early on, because John Candy, if you look, he's actually mouthing the lyrics. He's actually saying it right along with Ray Charles as he's singing it. So that had to be like, all right, for definitely we got to have Ray Charles for this. We got to have this song right here. We got to have "Mess Around." And the whole thing with Elton John and Paramount, I wonder how much clearance they had to go through, or how much pushback they got from Paramount with that one sequence. So, all right, Joe. So, what do you think, man?
I'm now the odd person out because this is one where, like, I think it worked really well for John Candy's Ray Charles scene. It worked really well there, but I feel like while the score's job in a movie is to really suck you in and pull you into the story, the soundtrack's job should be to hype you up and just get you to enjoy the movie. And I feel like so many of the 80s comedies and even 80s action movies, all the 80s movies, they tend to have a standout, promotionally huge, soundtrack song, something that's like Footloose had Footloose.
Yeah.
Top Gun had Danger Zone, because we're gonna keep Kenny Loggins going for the rest of this conversation. And I feel like this movie just didn't have that. Like, the soundtrack was there. At times, it just kind of like, I don't know, tried to disguise itself as score, and so it helped the score out, but it didn't have like fun promotional buzz, if that's a weird way of saying anything. But like,
understand what you're saying.
it didn't get me excited for the movie,
You're
other
like,
than
"Nah."
like I got to laugh with the car scene with John Candy, who's not paying attention to the road at all. So this is one where I think, like, I don't know, I could have used some Kiss on the Rose, Kiss from a Rose or something here, and I just didn't get that.
Or some On Our Own by Bobby Brown. I mean,
Yeah, where's that?
and that is kind of, but okay, so Joe, you and I are agreeing for different reasons at different points in this conversation. Like early on, I was saying that about this film, that like I love this film. I'm a big 80s fan, but like I never look back to a specific song on this and go, yep, that's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Right.
Yep. But as Joe mentioned, yeah, there are so many soundtracks that came out in like the corresponding time that, yeah, you immediately like one song you can tie directly to a movie. And yeah, Ray Charles, I'm sure most people will probably go like, yeah, Mark's an idiot, because Ray Charles was like not just an independent artist, but no, I do agree with that to an extent. But like, having listened to the soundtrack of this, because Chris actually, you sent it to me, so like I went through it and listened to the whole thing. I wasn't having a bad time. So it's just that it doesn't have like a power ballad on it.
Yeah,
that's basically it.
Yeah.
It's okay. So it's a good band without a lead singer. Is what
Yeah,
you're
there
telling
we go.
me.
Yeah, I think that looking at the soundtrack, the biggest song on here is "Every Time You Go Away."
Yep.
And you
Yep.
wouldn't associate that song really with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's not like, as you mentioned, Danger Zone. Kenny Loggins did a lot of those rock ballad, songs for those movies in the 80s. Or it's not like John Hughes, he did The Breakfast Club, so Don't You Forget About Me.
Yeah.
When you hear that song, you immediately think of Breakfast Club. When you think about Every Time You Go Away, I don't think of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Not at all.
Especially
You
like
don't- you don't
that.
think of John
Isn't that
Candy?
moved used at the very end of the movie?
Yeah.
It
Like
is.
when he's finally home, and even then, like, I don't know, like Breakfast Club. You bring up the big hit song that's used at the end of that movie. I feel like it perfectly fits in with like the theme of the kids in that movie, and it just pulls the whole thing together so well at the end. Whereas this is like, well, yeah, like he's been trying to get home the whole time. I feel like he's also been trying to survive the whole time.
The
So-
relationship with his wife is absolutely, there's no
Peripheral.
importance. There's
Yeah.
no importance placed on it other than like, yeah, he's got kids and a wife that
He's
misses him.
supposed to get home, yeah.
And then we've got no mention of it the entire, and Leslie, like you mentioned, if this was a 3-hour movie and maybe he actually shows some anguish over this, then maybe that song hits a little bit harder at the end, because you're like, wow, there's been a lot of growth and a lot of struggle here that we have full context of, but we don't. And so that song at the end just falls flat, because you're like, well, he made it home, but she's giving him the look.
Yeah, that's what
Like,
Chris was
clearly-
saying.
Mhm.
At the end, he's
but,
like, I just never understood his wife's reaction when she, because she stood at the top of the stairs making this face at him.
Yeah.
And she is. It's almost like a sight of anger mixed with happiness,
Affection
and
or
I'm
something,
going.
yeah.
I even to this day when we watched. I mean, we just watched the film yesterday, and we were sitting there. I was like, I still don't understand it. And then when we find out that the film is actually a lot longer, maybe there was a reason. Maybe there, was a whole storyline thing in there. So that I would love to see the full. Yeah, release the John Hughes cut. Everybody was
Yes.
going release the Snyder cut. Let's release the Hughes cut of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And who knows? It could be one of those things where there was a reason why the film was cut. I mean, because
maybe.
I mean, because the film is pretty hilarious.
Yeah,
as it
he said
is.
he used an insane length of film to film it. I can't. It was like 300,000 or 600,000 feet of film, or
Good Lord.
some weird,
Whew.
insane number. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like the small intestine right there.
Yeah. I was going to say, we need to see the Hughesenverse version of this. 'Cause,
the universe.
that's our new term.
Yes,
Just
the
for this
Hughesenverse.
podcast. The universe.
It's vast, and there's so many classics within it that this one
Yeah.
is a classic with
Mhm.
what they kept. But man, I would love to see what the rest of the context is. I mean, hell, Joe and I sat through Snyderverse or the Snyder cut,
Cut,
and
yeah.
that was like a blink of an eye, and all of a sudden I've used 4 hours of my day.
Yep.
I can't imagine what this would be like. I'm
No,
sure there's
although-
going to be something fun.
Although the Hughesenverse definitely sounds like Jeff Goldblum trying to pronounce universe and like stuttering a little bit. The Hughesenverse, as you see.
Yeah. Yeah, imagine him talking to like John Hughes behind the scenes. He's like, yeah. Is this the
Universe? Yes, universe.
Is this the universe? Are you trying to say universe? No. The universe.
Universe.
See,
Yes.
Chris Leslie, the marketing writes itself. Like, I'm surprised that no one thought of this.
It's gold. It's gold.
It's so gold. It's gold bloom.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So favorite scene, favorite score. Mark, I'll let you go first.
So for me, it all revolved around that hotel room, which is why I'm so happy that we focused on this so much. You guys already talked about the accents with the bed and like focusing on the fact that that is one bed for 2 men that won't fit on it. Like, wow. All right.
I think that bed can barely fit John Candy on it.
Oh, I know. I was going to say, if one person adjusts on that bed, the other person has to as well. There's no singular.
You both feel that.
He's going to be jettisoned off the bed.
Is that your wallet? Oh, wait, no.
It's like, where's your other hand? Between two pillows?
Oh,
there it is.
He goes, those are pillows.
And that's the thing. We watched this on DVD, and the edition that I have is those aren't pillows edition.
Oh, nice. Seriously, that when I think about this movie, that is the first thing I think of is the ear nibbling, as you mentioned, Chris, that you picked up on. You know, I could see a snapshot of this movie, and I would laugh at that every time. And then, so for me, like the slight bit of score that was there, I think sums up the movie perfectly. And then for me, the scene is of course, the bathroom scene is as much as like it makes me wriggle to see him put a bare foot to a wet floor. There is no worse feeling. It doesn't matter what context you're stepping into.
You don't
it
like
is the
stepping
worst
in wet.
ever.
That's right.
Especially roadside motel like tile floor.
Nope. It's like
No.
Nope.
It's like dropping any food in a piece of sand. You will never get that food back. Sorry, guys. Just
10
throw it
second
away.
rule does not work.
No.
Yeah.
No. and the whole list of 10-second rules at the very bottom, it's got an asterisk, and it says, does not apply for sand.
Yes.
All right.
Yep. So that's
Joe?
it. That does it for me. Those are the two.
Joe, what was your favorite scene or favorite score piece?
Favorite
soundtrack,
score piece
or soundtrack in this case. Sorry,
or
Mark,
soundtrack. Yeah. Oh no. Definitely favorite score piece is the synth from the Rush Hour scene.
Okay.
Because definitely like when I feel like you hear that and you feel like you're listening to the heartbeat of the country in the 1980s. It is just that is America. That is what we have in our movies, and it's what's in our clubs, and it's everywhere. So that is just a timepiece for me. Listening to that whenever I get that 80s synth. It's the same thing like when the Stranger Theme song comes on. I'm like, oh, wow, my childhood.
That's
it's fantastic.
Yep.
Makes you feel great.
It does. It really does. So that's easy. Favorite score piece. Favorite scene is definitely John Candy selling the shower curtain rings as anything but shower curtain rings.
These are your Daryl Strawberry autographed shower curtains.
Which always things like can't they see that no one has like autographed them? Like that should be a dead giveaway right away. And also thinking like, did they just like tell John Candy like here's what the scene is?
That's what that's really what it looks like. It looks like they just had the camera rolling and said, "Here, go."
Yep.
Then he have like he's like these are filled with helium, so they're really light.
Just it's like they could just be filled with nothing and they'd be fine.
Or like the whole sequence right there ends with with these three girls. You look really older. Dare I say 18, 21, and they're like hand him the
More
money.
cash.
Yep.
But there's some trivia with that. They said if you look back at the scene where he finished selling the rings and they're sitting down at the diner and they're eating, they said if you look, you can see the waitress has got them on as earrings, and in the background you got a few other people on as earrings.
Oh, the glory of the Hughesenverse
Yeah,
Yes.
and all of its attention to detail.
Which
Right.
I will say for 1 second, this is like a big dividing line between modern comedies and older ones, because
Mhm.
when you have improvisation that occurs, if it did here, it feels natural versus feeling like a joke that was recorded 100 times and they took the best one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
Completely
just,
agree.
it felt so natural to me.
Leslie, what was your favorite scene, score, soundtrack scene?
So I liked in the score, we only got two main pieces. I like the fact that some of the comedy elements, it sounds almost Looney Tune-ish. It kind of reminds me of cartoons. I pointed that out to Chris because there was one where it's just a bunch of woodwinds, and I'm like, this, is really reminiscent of, like the Road Runner trying to run away from Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah.
It's very, very comedic, and I really liked that because it kind of, to me, amped up this relationship between these two characters. It's like the ultimate odd couple. But then, my favorite scene is when the car catches on fire. So you see it build, you see him throw the cigarette and it bounces off the window and it goes into the back seat. And you sit there and you're arguing and you start seeing smoke. If you watch real closely, you start seeing smoke kind of in the background. And it's not obviously on fire yet. And, then they had that accident. Where they squeeze between the two trucks, there's a lot of screaming, and then he takes his fingers out of the dashboard, But then there's a scene where they get out, and he helps them get the trunk out of the road, and they sit on the trunk, and in the background, all of a sudden you see the light from where the car catches on fire on their backs,
Yeah.
and they turn around, and the car's burning. And to me, that was just absolutely hilarious because it didn't happen at once. It took, it took it a little bit of length of time to happen. And you start seeing these little subtle nuances,
Mm-hmm.
of all these events of this car actually catching on fire. And they didn't even, realize that there was something wrong because they had these other things that they had to face. So to me, that was my favorite scene.
Yeah, it reminded me of like the deer and Tommy Boy.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
like,
yes.
all right,
Yes.
as soon as I watch them, like, this is probably like some inspiration for the deer scene in Tommy Boy.
Yeah, definitely. Another film that, because I recently had never seen it before, Due Date with Robert Downey Jr. and Zach.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which that film is basically almost a remake of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for the modern age, but they just didn't call it Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. My favorite score piece is, it's very subtle, and I mentioned it earlier. It's the scene where they see the bed. It's that one little percussion hit. Because it just sells it home right then and there that what's fixing to happen. You're like, oh, there's one bed. But like I said, it's a quick not even
Like
a
2
second,
seconds,
like
yeah.
maybe I'll say a second. But it was my favorite moment because it just sells it home right then and there. My favorite scene though is right after they squeeze in between the two trucks and they got their fingers embedded into the dash, and John Candy's bent the steering wheel back. It was just like, wow, holy crap, dude! And then Steve, they're just like, picking their finger, the fingers out of the dash. And it just made me laugh every time. I was like, that had to have been intense. All right, so the last criteria we have overall, what could have been done differently? I'm gonna let Joe go first.
Could have been done differently. I don't know. Maybe I know we've been saying this whole time, like they let the comedy and like the actors really carry and do the heavy lifting for this movie. But I don't know. I think we could have used some more music, something ambient in the background. I could have used a little more score for it. Like
I
again,
agree.
like
Yeah.
I don't think it would have I still love a movie. It's a classic. But like, yeah, I think it could have benefited from having some more music in it.
Mark?
Yeah, we alluded to this a little bit ago. I think for me, it's the fact that the relationship between, husband and wife isn't really on display at all. And I think there was a place for it in the very beginning when he's sitting in the boardroom and they're pitching the marketing piece, and they're both just kind of going, well, I need to make this flight and there's no way I'm going to make it. And I get that Steve Martin's character is supposed to be, somewhat selfish, right? But I felt like his selfishness and the way that he kind of held himself was because of John Candy's character, right? Like that's why he behaved the way he did. So I don't know. I think the exploration into his marriage, missing his kids, these things that just they're not there. Like they don't exist.
Yeah, it kind
at
of
all.
feels empty. It feels kind of empty. You got this fellow, he's got children. He really didn't seem happy to see his children, even though he kind of said that he was happy. And then you saw how his wife reacted, and then she seemed happy that he was home. And you're like, this is an odd relationship.
Yeah.
I understand.
And then more Hughesenverse, real quick. Steve Martin's partner that he's talking to, the boardroom, is the dad from Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, Leslie, what could have been done differently?
I agree with Joe. I think there could have been a little bit more score or soundtrack, especially in the scene where he goes off on, for the car. He drops the F-bomb. I can't remember how many times. It's recorded somewhere how many times he said it. But I think that even when he's glaring at her, you could have had something in the background where because you can
Something
tell this
sharp.
anger is
Yeah.
building, and there's nothing there to denote that. And even the scene before that with him walking across the tarmac to get to the place to talk to the lady on that was talking about her Thanksgiving dinner on the phone. There's nothing there. You see him falling down. You see him hitting the pavement. I felt like they could have added something there to add to that because he's been brewing angrily. You could tell this whole time from when he notices his car's missing to walking that distance. So I feel like there could have been a little bit more score.
Oh boy, I'm gonna be the odd one out for this one. I think everything was placed perfectly. I mean, and I wouldn't say perfectly, but I think it was placed well enough. Maybe it's the nostalgia for me because I've watched the film so many different times. I think everything that was in there, I think it works. Yes, there could have been maybe just a little bit more score. I will give you guys that. But overall, I think everything was put in there well placed. So this is the one time where there's been an instance for every criteria where, not everybody's agreed on everything. Wow. That's a first.
Well,
for this
we all
podcast.
view things differently. And, this movie means different things for us. We were around the same age when it came out. So, we remember things differently. And then when we watch it as an adult, we start picking up on those little things we didn't as kids. Like the rings in the puddle, you didn't see that. Or the name, you didn't realize that he's the one that tripped over Dell's chest there at the beginning.
Or,
he's been there since the beginning.
Or Dale's name spells out doll.
Yeah, there's stuff.
As a kid, I aspired to say the F word 18 times in 40 seconds. Like that was what I paid attention to. But for people that hadn't seen the movie before and you see that it's rated R, and you're going, what? How is this movie rated R?
And then you get
that one scene. That one scene does the whole thing.
It was awesome.
One scene does it.
I love that scene. All right, so in the spirit of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, since there was a end credits scene, we're going to have an end credits scene for the podcast. We're going to have the future of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles after the credits. So real quick, guys, tell us where can we find Digital Dissection?
Oh, perfect. I can take this one. So our handle is at Digital Dissect 1. If you type it into most social media, that'll bring us up. Our search engine optimization is pretty good right now for Digital Dissection podcast. So if you put that into search engines, you'll find all of our stuff there. But we do also have the Digital Dissection blog, which we were too cheap to purchase a URL for. So I think it's still technically on WordPress. So, you'll figure it out if you get there. But yeah, that's how you'll find us.
And I definitely, listeners, go check these guys out. I mean, not just for us, just go listen because they got a ton of great content. And go, review them on Apple, basically wherever you can leave a review. And after you leave them one, leave us one too.
I saw what you did there.
And always, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just type in Measuring the Score podcast or just type in Measuring the Score and you can find us on there. I'm normally on Twitter. You can find Leslie on Facebook or I'm on Instagram as well. You can send us an email. I mean, we love emails. Measuringthescore@gmail.com. And, if you guys got idea for a score you want us to listen to, if you've got a score yourself, if you're a composer and you want to come onto the show or just have us talk about your score in the film, just let us know. We would love to hear from you guys. And, we've got a ton of great content coming up. Like I said, this is one of our bonus episodes. And our next episode after this is The Nightmare Before Christmas with the Nostalgia Test podcast.
Ooh.
Yeah, so Danny Manny, those guys are great. They're hilarious as well. And it's going to be a fun episode because, it's Nightmare Before Christmas, Danny Elfman.
Danny Elfman.
Man, come on. That score.
They're going to be so much more fun than we were for you guys.
I don't know about that.
We love y'all.
We are a bore.
Oh.
We love y'all.
I mean, if you look up boorish in the dictionary, y'all, we're going to be right next to it. So,
I thought boorish was a soup. Wait a minute. That's
borscht. Yeah,
Borscht. We might be there too.
We could be there.
Yeah,
Who knows?
Yeah.
Look up borscht. Yeah.
So, guys, as always, thank you. Mark, Joe, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. Seriously.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
It was an absolute blast. It really was. And as always, for Measuring the Score, I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
Have a good one. And this is our end credits spoiler. So the future of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, real quick, there is a remake planned with Will Smith and Kevin Hart.
I'll watch that.
Oh.
I like those two. They're fun.
Yeah, I wish it, like Leslie said, I wish it was Kevin Hart and The Rock.
Yeah, I think that would be
Oh my gosh,
That's
yes.
where my mind went to the same place. I was
Yeah.
like, why not put those guys in? But at the same time, I think using Will Smith's range is probably going to give us a little bit more than using The Rock's range.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can, because Will Smith is pretty funny. But I don't know. I mean, The Rock is hilarious in his own right. And that would be such an odd couple moment having The Rock and Kevin Hart. I mean, come on. I mean, so let's
back and
just
forth
say,
on Twitter alone.
Yeah.
Let's just say
okay.
The Rock would be the business type. Or you could have it flip-flop. Have Kevin Hart as the uptight business type, and then The Rock is the Dale Griffin character.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think
see that.
I think it would have worked if it was before all of the stuff that they did already, right? Like if The Rock and Kevin Hart had like just met or something, or they just started working together, then I think that could have worked better.
Yeah.
But knowing how those guys kind of play off each other now,
You would
I don't
expect
know.
it. You would expect it.
Yeah, you'd expect it.
Now,
Although, yeah.
There hasn't been much chatter on the film as last checked. I mean, I just found this out it was like the start of the pandemic, I want to say, because they also announced that Kevin Hart's going to be in the remake of The Great Outdoors as well.
Yeah.
I know
And
John Candy Goody.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Great
I
movie.
do.
So, but there hasn't been any new information about it, so I'm not even sure if the film is even still happening. But I do know when it was announced that Kevin Hart and both Will Smith, announced it on their social media platforms, and I was like, at first I was kind of like Leslie. I'm like,
Are they
more
remaking?
reboots, yeah.
more remakes, more reboots. But I hope they don't turn this into one of these things where they oversimplify something and then slam it into your face, slam it home. I hope they keep the genius that the Hughesenverse has.
You know, the layers, all the layers.
No, in all seriousness, no, I really do hope they keep the layers, and I hope that they keep the genius that John Hughes had for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah, I hope that the movie will finally get what I've been wanting out of it, with Will Smith being in it, and even though he hasn't done it in a while, and that is to drop a bomb hip hop album or song made explicitly for that movie. And that is what we need for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is his Wild Wild West version of that movie.
It's not really a bad song. I was in Germany when it came out, so everybody's like, "Oh, listen to Will Smith's new song," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is kind of cool,"
Yeah.
All right, so that was our end credits spoiler or end credits sequence for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You guys got anything else before we completely close it out?
I do want to apologize. I said hell earlier.
Oh, no.
I should have said heck. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going to have to go back and edit that, Chris.
That's okay.
I'll
leave
was the
it.
pumpkin spice latte. Alcohol talking.
Just for you guys, I'm gonna leave that one in there.
Yeah, everyone gets one.
Yeah. Oh hell.